All right, I'm excited. I told the guys a couple weeks ago how excited I was to talk to Bob Savary and the Johnson boys. I'm equally excited, or more so even today, so great to see you guys. I just want to welcome, of course, Jack Evans, Steve Stroman from Kennedy. We've got Zig Calls from Mounds View, Lynn Crave from Minnetonka, and of course Warren Bowman from Osseo. Coaches, just, let's maybe start with Steve. Tell us about yourself and how you got into coaching.
My father was a coach, athletic director down in St. James, Minnesota. And I kind of grew up around sports, and I guess that was the push. I played a few sports and went to college to play sports, and just thought I would like to coach sports when I got out. I guess family was the big reason. Well, my dad did.
Zig?
Well, I got started, we're an immigrant family, and it was an easy thing to excel at when you first come to the States. And my mentors, both my parents worked, and one of the coaches lived pretty close to our house. And they happened to be, the way it turned out, a lineage of Hamline University coaches, All-American Hal Haskins. And when he left, he was followed by Kerwin Engelhart. And Kerwin Engelhart was a big inspiration to me. Class guy, eventually wound up athletic director for the Rochester schools. But he took to our family. And I said, want to know what it'd be like to be a coach. And he gave me some Scholastic Coach magazines to look at. And so I kind of got interested, and maybe it is something I'd like to do. He actually advised me not to.
Not to do it.
No, don't do that.
Really?
At that time, I couldn't tell if he was kidding or not.
To this day, you still don't know.
No, I still don't know. But he got me really interested, and then I had an older brother that was a good athlete, and he played for Hal Haskins, so I saw a lot of games, and we eventually found a way to get in the school building through the coal chute.
Right.
And then it just grew.
Lynn?
Well, I grew up in Faribault, and I can remember when I was a young person listening to the Gopher games on the radio every Saturday. No television, had no television at that time. And I had two groups of marbles, one the Gophers and one another, and I'd run them together and see who, have Fonts or whoever it is, gained a few yards. I did that. I was always interested in athletics. And I ran track and played tennis and played basketball. And at college, I went to Minnesota my first year, played freshman ball with Bud Hamilton was there, and John Jelasic and Bob Schmidt and a bunch of guys. 110 guys tried out at that time, and I think there were 15 of us who ended up working out in Cook Hall. Freshmen were ineligible. Anyway, I transferred to Carleton and played there 3 years, and went to Minnetonka, and had a job as a math teacher. And then Earl Christ was the coach, and said, "You want to help with the coaching?" Well, I wasn't the coaching. I was a scout, and they'd bring the information back, etc. That was my introduction to it. I did that for 7 years, and then when he retired after winning the state in '65, I took that job for then the next 15 years.
Warren?
I grew up watching the state basketball tournament and kind of fell in love with it, and shooting baskets in my driveway. And one of our neighbors, his dad was the principal, and he'd let us into the gym on weekends when he would work. And man, I thought it was just a cathedral. I mean, we were all by ourselves in the gym, and we pretended that we were famous players. And then I went into teaching, and I just started out as like a sophomore coach or ninth grade coach, and kind of worked my way up, and here I am.
So you got into Osseo pretty quickly?
I was out west originally. I was at Hector, and then I came into Osseo from there. And,
Who are your role models, you guys? And speak up, whoever wants to go first. Who are your role models in coaching and why?
Well, I can start, I guess. I go back to Earl Christ, who was sort of my mentor. I go back to Walt Olson, who was my high school coach. Interesting enough, his daughter is out in Seattle where my son is, and we've made contact, and she was about 10 years old when I was 15 years old, so we go back a long time, so that's interesting. And the other one is my good friend, Ziggy's good friend, Veljko Rajasic, who taught me the two-handed set shot, which you never know that anymore. But anyway, he was a great guy, a great teacher of the game, and had a personality that it was just fun to play for him. So I think those three people would be the three I think the most affected the way that I thought about dealing with coaching.
Role models. Go ahead, Zig.
Well, Veljko, the guy he's talking about. I never coached any basketball before I was appointed the head coach at Mountain View. None. Coach came up to me and said, "I like the way you work with the track kids." And I was a high jump coach. And his son, Joe Kunze's son, was the high jumper. And so I worked with him and had Brad Buto, who was a state champion high jumper. You people would know him from the hockey fame. He's jumped 7 feet. And
In high school he did.
he did it in the summer after that. He was a 2-time state champion. I think he beat out Bob Zender, a basketball name,
oh, yeah.
6'4" or something like that. But he was a late developer, and he took off, and he always placed in the Big Ten. He was a good athlete. But Veljko was a big thing, and he mentioned something about the number of freshmen. My brother, Ted, learned to play basketball in the refugee camp in Würzburg, Germany. That's Dirk Nowitzki's hometown.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was in 1953. We came over at 50. So I got a chance to see him play. He made the Gopher freshman team that he's talking about. He had Jerry Kindle and Dave Tucker, and I think Whitey Johnson was on that team too. But he blew his knee out, but that's the connection with the interest. And then Kerwin Engelhardt coached at Hamlin, he coached at Mounds View. What am I saying? Getting confused. Kerwin was my high school coach in Forest Lake,
Okay.
and he was a huge influence.
My college coach, Ernie Anderson, had the biggest influence on me. We had went to Augsburg College, and those are the days that they had a picture in the Tribune of our team, of 10 or 11 guys on the team, and 8 or 9 of them all had moms and dads that went to Augsburg. No one got recruited. We just showed up, and Ernie came out to watch me play one day, and one night, when I was a senior at Hutchinson, and he told my parents, "Oh, we'll take him if he wants to come." So anyway, we had all these guys come together and won 3 MIAC championships in a row, and we're about 70-10 in my last 3 years there. And his demeanor and the way he handled people and his thoughts on basketball had the biggest influence on me.
Warren.
I think I always thought my coaches in high school were really good teachers too. I think that had a profound impact on me. I didn't sense any that they were just there to coach. I think they took an interest in all the kids, and that kind of impressed me. I thought they were. My football coach was my history teacher, and I thought he did an excellent job in the classroom. And during the season, you couldn't even tell he was in the middle of the season. His history class, he was prepared for history, and I thought all my coaches were that way, and that probably had a real profound influence on me. And so I tried to be professional when I went out and tried to do the job in the classroom too, and that was an influence on me.
Coach, I read a quote, I don't know if you guys know this, but Coach Evans, for years, used to cut out pictures from the paper and articles from the paper, and maybe Zig, maybe you've done some of this, and put together a yearbook for that season. And so at the end of each season, you would give every player on that team, they just photocopy and turn it into kind of a yearbook for the season. So, and every player would get this. And I still, to this day, look at that. And I read a quote, I guess I want to fire something at you guys. I read a quote that you said back in my senior year, so this is 1987, and some reporter, newspaper reporter, coach, was interviewing you. And you said that you got into coaching because you wanted to teach, you wanted to coach basketball and coach sports, but you thought back when you guys were younger men and deciding what you're going to do with your life, you thought back in those days, kids maybe looked up to coaches and teachers a little bit more than say they did, say, in the 80s or even now. Do you think that's true? Do you think when you guys were young men and deciding to get into teaching or coaching, that you looked at teachers and coaches in your life a little differently than they do now? Do you think that's true?
I think that's why I went into coaching. As Warren was talking about, we only had two sports in Superior, football and basketball, and they didn't have hockey at that time.
No baseball.
And no baseball either. No track.
Really?
But anyhow, we had. I had both these coaches. I had more respect for them, I think, and I thought and the community had respect for them. If I could live my life and do the kind of things that they did, that'd be great. If I could get the respect that they have, in my mind. So.
I think the summer has had, the kids have more than one coach now. They have this summer coach too, who's really had an influence. And I don't know if it's maybe a double-edged sword. There's some good, but there probably is detracted some from the high school coach too a little bit.
When I first started, the coach or the teacher was always right. And by the time I got done with coaching, and certainly now, from what I hear from other people, is that the coach is rarely right, or the teacher is rarely right. So it's been a whole change in society, and I don't know where all that happened, but when the school programs were lost with budget cutbacks and so on, we went to all these traveling teams and stuff. Then we had what Warren was saying, other coaches, and they knew how to do things better, and there's pluses or minuses to that. But overall, just the feeling that the coach was almost godlike down to where, well, we don't need the coach as much anymore. Big change.
Yeah.
If you got in trouble in school, I always wanted to get home to my mother first. If I could convince her that I was wrong. But by the time Dad got home, I was in trouble probably. Now, if I go up to the school, he said, is he going to tell me the same story? Oh, sure. But it is. But I could convince my mother that, oh, yeah, boy, I was mistreated here.
Well, the coaches were all teachers at that time, all of them.
Yeah.
That I can recall. And they were the people you walked into that high school that you knew who they were because you named in the paper for years and years and years. And there was a respect right away. And they were accessible because they were in the school and they knew how to handle kids, as opposed to sometimes now we hire people who maybe have not been trained and they're looking for somebody to coach a team and not an educator, and sometimes that can create some problems. There are enough problems, as we know.
My dad, when he got into coaching and teaching, He was down in Owatonna Marion, a school that I think has closed. And he tells a story of, so he was just in his early mid-20s, and he was down in Owatonna teaching, and he had one of the fathers of one of his kids that he was teaching in one of his classes, big farmer, big strong guy, came up to my dad and said, if my kid screws off in your class and you don't discipline him the proper way, I'm looking for you, and you and I got a big problem. How different is that? I mean, it's almost like if you don't handle it like you need to do, then you and I are going to have a serious talk here.
That is different.
How that is different, huh?
Yeah.
One of my last year, at Osseo, we were turning more minority kids. And I had this lady call me, and she said, now you're going to have, I think it was his grandson. Now, she said, do you have a basement in the school? She said, we handle the discipline here. You do whatever you have to do. Well, when he walked through the door, there was no way I was going in the basement with him without 2 or 3 guys. I called her up and said, we're just going to try to use common sense. Yeah, he was fine, but I mean, that was old school. She said, you take him down the basement and do whatever you have to do. There is no way. I mean, he would have, but he was about 6'3", about 210 pounds, and it turned out to be a fabulous kid, but she said, you do whatever you have to do, but that's from overseas somewhere now. We don't get that now.
Right, exactly. All right, name some of the qualities that good coaches possess. What are some of the qualities that good coaches possess?
I thought about that because Jim sent me the questions. It's different now than when you go back to when we started, and it was the tough guy, the Bobby Knights, and some of those guys that were disciplinarians that you didn't screw up. If you screwed up, you got your rear end chewed as you came to the sidelines. I think that pretty much has gone away as I see it, and I see a lot of the successful coaches now do have a relationship with their players when they come off the floor. They talk to them without giving a little direction, but not embarrassing them. So, and I think part of that is you just can't treat kids the way that some of the kids were treated, not only in basketball but in football and other sports, going back to the 50s and 60s, etc.
They were trying to make you tough, back then, and now you probably can't do that. I remember in football practice, we had no water. Can you imagine, drinking water was almost a sign of weakness. Today the guy would be sued if he did that. But, I mean, it was just expected that it was going to make you tougher or, and I guess, I don't think you can do that now.
What was the television program where Fraser Crane was on? Remember him, the psychologist?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
I think that's where the coaches have kind of had to turn to be a psychologist. You got 20 different personalities, and you got to treat them 20 different ways. And what button to push, what button not to, and
Yeah, some kids they need a pat in the back. Some needed a kick in the pants. Is that kind of the old saying?
It gets tricky.
Why is that?
They'll go home and they'll say, well, he's always kicking this guy around, and this guy, he never gets disciplined, and he's probably doing everything right. I tried to kind of bridge that by, at some point, is making sure that my best players and leaders, when they screwed up somehow or another, I would get to them, and the squad would know that this discipline is required even for the best guy. Mm-hmm. I held a kid out against Osseo, I think, at Osseo. He had written his own passes when he came in late to school. And a wonderful player, played for Bethel and played in the state tournament, but he had to sit out that game. I held out one of the best all time, Nick Horvath. He was getting a screen from a kid from Duluth East, Rick Rickert. And he'd been frustrated. He'd been getting caught on the screen. So the next time Rick Rickert came through there, he gave him a shot in the throat with a forearm. He went